Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you to the 20th lecture of the course Management, Organizational Policies and Practices. Let's have a quick recap on lecture 19 and then we move to the contents of the 20th lecture. We discussed the different labor union arrangements and the collective bargaining agreements between the labor unions and the management in our 19th lecture. So that was the topic of our 19th lecture, wherein discussed why the workers they form unions. We discussed a number of reasons behind the formation of unions, such as they want job security, they want better working conditions, and they want to avoid the arbitrary whims of the management, and they want to be participated in the decision making by the management and by the higher authorities, and they want to have a more safe and more secure workplace. So there are a number of reasons why workers form unions. They also form unions because sometimes unions arrange the training activities and other such activities which can be helpful for the employability of the workers, and in order to reap the benefits of such union trainings arranged by the unions and the activities arranged by the unions, they take part in the union formation. And sometimes workers they join unions only because of the peer pressure that their peers they are joining the unions, so they should also join the unions. So there are a number of reasons behind the workers joining these unions and behind the formation of these unions. Then we had a detailed discussion on the collective bargaining process. We started off with what collective bargaining is, and then we discussed the different parties which are involved in this process. We discussed that the management is represented by the management representatives, or the employer is represented by the management representative, and we have the shop steward, or we have the union representative who represents the employees in the organization. And these two parties they come together over the negotiating table, and then they make the collective bargaining over a number of items that are mandatory to be discussed in the bargaining process, or in the making of the contract. Before the signing of the final contract, it is important to have a discussion or have a negotiation over a number of items, and those items are discussed in this collective bargaining process. We had a discussion of what is the good faith bargaining and what are the different violations of good faith bargaining, when we can term that the practices that are being adopted, or the acts or actions of the management representative or the employee representative are not good faith. We discussed a number of different possibilities, such as the dilatory tactics which are used by the employer, in which the meetings are not held within reasonable time intervals, or adequate concessions are not given by one or the other party, or inadequate proposals are floated, right, where the demands are unreasonable from the parties, from one party or the other party, right, and unfair labor practices are used, so the employer bypassing the representative, and so on. So there were a number of options that we had discussed which violate the good faith bargaining process. Then we had a discussion with the help of the example that how the bargaining is not good faith. We discussed various conditions for good faith bargaining. Then we had a discussion on the parties in the negotiations and the different steps in this negotiation process. What are the different stages in the negotiation process, and the bargaining process, and how the bargaining process actually takes place, and how it starts off with the proposals prepared by both the parties, and then they make their counter proposals, and then they have a discussions, and then they refer to the subcommittees, and they have the discussion of these counter proposals with the subcommittees, and they come up with the the other recommendations, other alternatives, other possible solutions. Then they meet again, and then they finalize the contract. Then we also had a discussion on the bargaining items, and I showed you a table wherein we had the mandatory bargaining items, where we had the voluntary and the permissible bargaining items, and wherein we had the illegal bargaining items. And we discussed that the illegal items, they just cannot be bargained. They're not allowed to be bargained by both parties or by any of the party, and the mandatory items, they must be bargained by both the parties, and the sign should be contract should be signed accordingly. And the voluntary items, they can be discussed by the parties upon their mutual consent. None of the parties can force the other party to enter into such contract, but they can be, if they both agree, then they can enter into such negotiations over the voluntary items, and then they can sign a contract upon the voluntary items. But otherwise, it's not a requirement that they enter into a contract over the voluntary items. We had a discussion on the impasses and the strikes, that how the impasse takes place when the negotiations are not successful between the two parties, and they're not able to due to a number of reasons, such as there are inadequate concessions by one of the parties, or one party is totally inflexible, and or the other party is inflexible, and you're totally rigid on your stance or on your proposal. You're not ready to listen to the views of the other party, and you're not giving them adequate hearing. The impasse can occur, and impasse, as a result of the impasse, there are 2-3 options that are available to both the parties. That is a third party involvement, and third party involvement can be through mediations and arbitrations. We discussed that how the mediator, he basically holds meetings individually with both the parties, and then he tries to find the common grounds over which the two parties can enter a solution or an agreement, and a signed contract can be signed. So the mediator only basically tries to catch up various possibilities of the mutual ground between the two parties, and he gives them suggestions that this is how they can proceed further. He only gives his recommendations and suggestions, and but he cannot make a final decision. On the other hand, we discussed that how arbitrator, the decisions that are made by the arbitrator, they are final, and they're binding on the two parties to follow that decision. So they can dictate the settlement terms. The arbitrators, they have this authority that they can dictate the settlement terms. So that we know that when an impasse situation, it has gone to the arbitrator, then there will be a final solution to it. But in the case of the mediation, we still don't know that even after the mediations, the parties, they are unable to achieve they are unable to come up at an agreement. So we discussed the grievances and the grievance holding procedure, that what procedure should be followed to hold the grievances, why the different grievances arise in the first place, right, and what procedure should be followed to hold those grievances. We also discussed a number of do's and don'ts while handling these grievances. We also discussed the labor laws in Pakistan. We discussed a number of labor laws in Pakistan. We also discussed them in the light of the Constitution of Pakistan of 1973, and we also discussed the National Labour Policy of Pakistan. And we had a discussion on what the Labour Department of Pakistan says about the labour relations and collective bargaining, about the rights of the labour union, about the right of or the freedom of association of the members to join the unions, when the unions can be formed in an organisation, what are the requirements for the formation of union, how it needs to be registered, and what are the fair labour practices and unfair labour practices when it comes to the union members and when it comes to the employer. So we had a discussion on a number of these different areas under the Pakistani law. So this was it for the for our 19th lecture on the labor relations and collective bargaining, and today we are going to discuss employee safety and health. This constitutes the lecture 20. What you can expect from this lecture is we'll be discussing the importance of safety, why safety is important. We'll be discussing the occupational safety laws in Pakistan. We'll be discussing the responsibilities and rights of employers and employees. We'll be discussing the top management's role in safety. We'll be discussing what causes the different accidents at workplace, or what makes the workplace more unsafe. So there can be a number of different factors that can make the workplace unsafe, such as the unsafe conditions and the other work-related factors, right? And there can be the unsafe acts which are on the part of the employee that can cause the accidents, and then we also have the chance occurrences that can cause the accidents. So we'll see that what causes unsafe acts, how to prevent the accidents by reducing the different factors that are the causes of these accidents. So we'll discuss the two factors, one the unsafe conditions and the other one the unsafe acts, and we'll see that how we can reduce the unsafe acts and the unsafe conditions to reduce the accidents in the workplace. Then we'll be discussing how reducing unsafe acts by emphasizing safety. Then we'll have a discussion on reducing unsafe acts through selection and placement, through training and motivation. We'll be discussing how to conduct safety and health audits. We'll be discussing the various workplace health hazards, the workplace substance abuse, the infectious diseases at the workplace, what are their outcomes for the organization, the stress and burnout and depression, what are their outcomes for the organization, and how the organization can deal with these, because these are all the health hazards. And other computer related health problems, they're also again the health hazards, and how the organization needs to deal with them, what are their outcomes, the workplace smoking, and we'll lastly discuss the violence at workplace and how the organization needs to handle the violence at workplace, and what should be the organizational policy to deal with the angry employees. So what accidents must be reported? This is a very interesting figure, and it basically explains the whole mechanism under which an injury or an accident that can be reported in the head of occupational injuries or occupational accidents. So we see that there are when a death occurs, an illness occurs, if we see in the yellow blocks, we see that when somebody dies, or someone is ill, or there is an injury that occurs in the workplace, and all these three things, they are resulting from a workplace accident or from an exposure in the work environment, right? So whenever any death that occurs, any illness that occurs, or any injury that occurs that is the result of the workplace or the environment of the workplace, or that is from the exposure to the workplace environment, that comes under the workplace accident, and it must be reported. So how do we define an injury? An injury that involves medical treatment other than first aid, right? An injury that involves any injury that involves only first aid, that may not be reported, or that won't fall under occupational injuries, right? Then the loss of consciousness, if employee gets faint, then that should be reported. Restriction of work or motion, that should be reported. Transfer to another job, that should be reported. And if none of these happens, right, and the injury constitutes any injury which is not amongst one of these, then that need not be reported. Such as I told you, if the employee only, it's a minor injury and the employee only needs first aid, then that does not need to be reported. But if the injury is one of all these 4 other kinds, then that needs to be reported, right? And if these injuries or these illnesses or these deaths, if they are not a result of the workplace accident, or they are not coming from exposure from the work environment, then they don't need to be reported, right? Then they are not workplace injuries, or they are not occupational injuries or occupational accidents, and then they should not be reported. So what is the importance of safety? What is the importance of safety policy? Why we are studying this safety, and why it is important to study it? If we talk about Pakistan, the Pakistani Federal Bureau of Statistics reports that the percentage of occupational accidents and injuries sustained during the 2010-11 fiscal year was around 3.5% of the total labor force, whereas the percentage in rural areas is 70%, while in urban areas is 30%. Right, so it is so this statistic shows that almost 3.5% accidents of the workplace they are basically coming from the occupational accidents and injuries, which is a big number, which is a big ratio, right? And if we look at this statistic sector wise, we'll see that highest injuries are being reported in the agriculture sector, which are 49.8%, followed by manufacturing, which is 15.8%, and then construction, which is 13%. Then we have wholesale and retail trade, which is 10.3%. Then we have transport, storage and communication, which is 7.1%. So what are the implications for the organization of these occupational injuries and the health injuries and accidents? Of course, lawsuits. There are medical insurance claims. The more the injuries, the more the medical insurance claims. The more the injuries, the more the injured employees or the they're more prone to go to the court and file lawsuit against the company for unsafe conditions, for example, right? And then there's loss of employees and the wastage of time. Of course, even if the injury is not that major, it is not that fatal, but still some of the employees' time is lost, and employee needs to rehabilitate and then come back to work, and all that time is being lost in the operations of the organization. Okay, there are a number of health and safety laws in Pakistan, such as Factories Act 1934. The applicability of Factories Act 1934 is eminent to all types of organizations, as it acts as a baseline for the government and the organization to ensure compliance. The legal framework of Pakistan Factories Act 1934, it consists of 39 essential clauses in Chapter 13 of the Act that ensures the safety and health compliance. So there are 39 essential clauses in under this Act, and I have not, of course, I'm not going to report those clauses here, because they are really huge and they are beyond the scope of this lecture, but I would urge you to have a look at those clauses in the Pakistan Factories Act 1934. You can just get it from Google. You can get all these clauses from Google and have a look at all those safety and health laws in Pakistan. And then we have the National Labour Policy of 2010 as well, which is relating to the employee safety and health at the workplace. What are the different duties and rights of the employer and the employee when it comes to the safety and health at workplace? There are a number of responsibilities of the employer. So first responsibility of the employer is to provide a safe and healthy workplace. Of course, it's the right of every employee that where he is working, that should be a safe workplace. Then set and familiarize with safety and health standards. That is the second responsibility of the employer, to set this the safety and health standards first, right? Set those standards, make a policy, safety and health policy, and then familiarize everyone with those standards, publish those standards, make everyone know those standards, right, and ensure workplace conditions conform to safety standards. Employers also have certain rights other than the responsibilities. First, it's the right of the employer to seek advice from the government agencies on the safe and health workplace, and they have also the rights to receive advice on safety and health regulations. Then the employee has certain responsibilities as well. Employee is responsible to follow all employer safety and health issues and regulations, and employee is responsible to report the hazardous conditions to the supervisor. If there are any faulty conditions, if there are any problems that the employee sees that in the procedure there is certain problem, or there is some problem in the pipe, it is leaking, or there is some problem in the working of the machinery, it's producing some noise, or if the employee perceives any kind of problem, it should report it immediately to the employer for further actions. And the employees, it is the employee's right, of course, to demand safe and healthy workplace without any fear of punishment. When we talk about safety and health standard or safety and health policy in the organization, what is the role of the management here? Of course, management role is important in any aspect in the organization, whether that is related to the equal employment opportunity policies, whether it is related to the diversity issues, whether it is related to the sexual harassment issues, or it is related to the safety and health issues. Role of management is the key role. Unless and until top management is really committed to its goal of ensuring the safe and healthy workplace, that cannot actually happen, even if it makes the policies, even if those policies are well communicated. But if top management commitment is missing, employees will never get the strong signals from the management, from the organization. Organizational culture is prone to be weak when management is not committed. When management itself is management can use a number of ways to show its commitment towards a cause, because of course, as I told you earlier, that making the policies, organizational policies such as safety and health policy, or policy on leaves, or policy on holidays, etc., that is not enough. Those policies are only pieces of paper unless and until we motivate the employees towards the actions that are required by them, right? And that motivation can only come through the top management commitment. Policy will never be implemented unless and until the top management commitment is there, right? And top management can show its commitment with actually doing what has been stipulated in the policy itself, right? By following those policies and those guidelines themselves. Top management can also inculcate that commitment in its employees through ways of symbols, through ways of signals, through ways of different signs, through ways of different stories. It can use all those different ways to inculcate their commitment towards the achievement of certain goals and certain policies to the employees. So safety starts with the management commitment, and management needs to be personally involved in safety activities. And personal involvement means that, one, they follow the safety activities and they follow the safety standards themselves, and secondly, they also make the visits to the different sites and the different plants of the organization or the manufacturing concern or whatever it is. They make the visits regularly, and they personally make the visits to show their commitment towards the safety goals and the safety measures, and in order to ensure whether the employees are conforming to the safety policy or not, they need to make the constant and the regular plant visits. Of course, they need to make a safety policy, and that safety policy should be well communicated. They should provide the safety trainings to all workers. Right, safety trainings, they can really improve the conditions. They can reduce the unsafe acts. We'll see this in detail in our next slide. Then analyze accidents and take corrective preventive actions. Right, if any accidents have occurred, they need to analyze them, the source of that accident, why that occurred, and of course take corrective and preventive actions, so that one, correct that accident, and second, take those measures that such accidents do not happen again. Employees are sometimes resistant when it comes to following the safety procedures or when it comes to following the safety policy. Employees, because sometimes they are basically there is this self-perception bias, and sometimes employees, they just don't feel it very necessary to to wear certain safety equipment, right? And for example, the wearing of the gloves or the wearing of goggles while doing something, some employees are more prone not to wear such safety equipment than the other employees. They are just type A personalities, or they're overconfident of themselves, they're over aggressive, or they just feel that they don't feel the importance of wearing that equipment, and they show resistance in wearing that equipment. So there are other reasons for that. Their resistance can also be the wearability. Sometimes the equipment is difficult to wear, the safety equipment is difficult to wear, and then employees are resistant to comply with those safety and health standards. How can you make the employees in such cases, how can you reduce the resistance and gain their compliance? So there are two options. One is that you bargain with the union for the right to discharge or discipline an employee who disobeys safety standard, right? So that is one option. The other option is that you use positive reinforcement and training for gaining employee compliance, right? So positive reinforcement means that if some employees, they are complying with the safety policy of the organization, then do encourage those employees and do recognize their compliance with the occupational safety and health standards, and use negative reinforcement if they're not following that safety policy. Discourage their behavior in personally, in public, issue them some charge sheet, etc., and by ways of that discourage their behavior through way of negative reinforcement. And second option, as the first option, as I told you, that is through the union, that you with the union you bargain that you have the right to discharge or discipline an employee if he disobeys the safety rules. So we discussed that there are, in my outline I told you that there are a number of causes of these workplace accidents. One is the unsafe conditions, which is the improperly guarded equipment. It is the defective equipment. So there are a few examples of these unsafe conditions. When the equipment is improperly guarded in the workplace, when it is defective, of course it is prone to an accident. When there are hazardous procedures in or around the machines or equipment that are being used, then there is unsafe storage. For example, there is congestion or there is overloading. Then there is improper illumination, such as the glare or insufficient light. So these are again unsafe conditions, because if there is not proper light, there is not proper illumination, and there is not improper ventilation, such as insufficient air change, then it can of course lead the employees to suffocation. So it can lead to the suffocating work conditions, and the lack of light or the too much fast light or too slow light, that can lead to lost concentration of the employees, or not as much concentration as is required, and that can lead to workplace accidents. So all these are the unsafe examples of the unsafe work conditions. So if you look at this figure, it again highlights all those different points that I have just explained to you, the factors that are involved in the unsafe conditions. And here it is important to understand that these different unsafe conditions, they can be different for different organizations, right? For example, if we talk about a manufacturing concern, therein this improper defective equipment and improperly guarded equipment and hazardous procedures, handling of machinery, that can be important, right? And the lighting, of course, as well, and the ventilation as well. So these factors all seem to be important when we talk about the manufacturing concern, or when we talk about a plant where the operations are taking place and where the manufacturing is taking place, right? But what do you think about a university setting for the university employees, or for the university as a workplace? What can be the improperly guarded equipment? What can be the defective equipment? These are not as much bigger causes of accidents or as much workplace hazards in a university environment as they are in a manufacturing concern. So for a university where the people are sitting in their offices and only doing the paperwork and the manual work, or who are working electronically, there are none of these hazards. They don't have to deal with hazardous machinery. They don't have to deal with the very high or very low temperatures. They don't have to deal with the slippery floors and spillovers, inflammatory machinery or inflammable material. They are not dealing with that kind of hazardous conditions, right? So for them, the only challenges can be, for example, if there is wiring is not proper, right, and or the light issues that can be there, or the ventilation issues can be there. But if there is the space, the distance and the height of the computer is not adjustable, or it is more or less than your posture, or the way you are sitting, your seat is not comfortable. So you have this kind of, you can have this kind of unsafe conditions when you talk about the university environment. So these different workplace conditions, or the causes of the workplace conditions, they are different. They might be industry specific, they can be sector specific, right? So different in the agriculture sector, for example, the unsafe conditions would be different than they would be in the industry sector, and they would be different in the service sector than the these sectors, right? So we need to understand that these are context specific. I have a checklist of mechanical and or physical accident causing conditions. So there is general housekeeping. I'll just read 2 or 3 for you as examples, and then I go on, and then you can have a look at all this list in detail. If you look at under the head of general housekeeping, there is adequate and wide aisles, no materials protruding into aisles, parts and tools stored safely after use, not left in hazardous positions that could cause them to fall, even and solid flooring, no defective floors or ramps that could cause falling or tripping accidents. Then there is material handling equipment and conveyances. Then there are ladders, scaffold, benches, stairways, etc. So how can you prevent these accidents? Of course, by reducing the unsafe conditions. You need to emphasize on safety. You need to inculcate this belief in the employees that their safety is important, that their lives are important, and that these are really, there can really be certain safety issues, that if they don't follow the safety procedures, or if they don't wear the safety equipments, that can be hazardous for them, and that can be a threat to the safety in the organization. So you need to emphasize the safety. You need to select safety minded employees, right? So we know that in certain, just as I explained to you earlier, that some employees, they are more prone to accidents than other employees because of their different personalities. Such as if we see the type A personalities are those individuals, as I explained to you in I think my motivation lecture, that type A personalities are those individuals who are really outcome oriented, and they want to gain as much as they can in less and less time, right? So they really are, they have strict deadlines, and they follow those deadlines. They believe more in quantity than in quality, and they believe more in numbers, right? So this kind of people, they are really aggressive in nature. Basically, they can show more violent and aggressive behaviors, and these personalities can or the people who are oriented towards aggression, who are more aggressive, such as we know for the drivers, that there is a lot of difference between the drivers. Some of the drivers, they are really aggressive. They really take very dangerous cuts and turns, and their driving is very risky, right? And they are the first ones to who want to go when the signal turns green from red, and they just want to cross they just want to cross when the signal is turning almost turned red. They just want to cross because they are really aggressive in nature, and such people, they are more prone to accidents. So in certain occupations, we need to see that what can be the different hazards in those occupations, and and how those hazards they can be tested for in the personalities of the individuals, right? So for the aggressive nature, aggressive behavior of these drivers in the when it comes to hiring the driver, a driver that is that can be very dangerous, that can be very risky, right? Not only for their own lives but also for the lives of others. Therefore, this trait of aggressiveness that can be very important indicator when you are going to design your selection for a driver, right? And similarly, certain other traits they might be more important for certain other occupations, right? So the personality traits, you need to design your tests in a way that you can screen out the people who are whose personality matches with the requirements of your job. Then you can provide the safety trainings to the workers, right? Train them, give them formal trainings on how safety is important, why it is important, and how they can follow the safety measures. You can use posters, you can use incentive programs, you can use positive reinforcement to motivate the employees, right? I talked a bit about the positive reinforcement earlier, but we can also have the incentive programs in the form of the bonuses that you can give to the employees to encourage the use of the safety procedures. And you can use posters at different places, different symbols and different posters to show that the employees should adopt the safety procedures, right? Then you can also use this behavior-based safety. Behavior-based safety is that we tend to identify that what are the different behaviors of the employees, which behaviors of the employees are potentially more prone to accidents or which are not safe behaviors, and we try to change those behaviors of the employees. That is the behavior-based safety. Then you use employee participation. Employee participation can really help the organization. Because when we know that the benefits of participation, so benefits of participation, again, they are in every area, right? So when you involve the employees in the organizational decision making, in the policy making, right, or in a number of other issues or in the number of other areas in the organization, of course that leads to higher motivation on the part of the employees. When they participate in the policy making process or in how to make your workplace more safe, when you take their input on this, they are more likely to give you good input. One, because they are basically the people at the shop floor, they are directly dealing with the different equipments, with the different machinery or different processes or the different operations. They're dealing directly with those operations, therefore they can give you better information on what is unsafe and how or what measures can be used to make it more safe. So employee participation is important because, one, it can give you a better picture of how your organization is like and how you can make it more safe, and secondly, when you give them a say in the whole process, then they are also more likely to be more committed with the initiatives taken by the organization. They're more going to identify with those initiatives and they are more going to commit themselves to those initiatives, and thus they can more successfully implement those initiatives. Then of course you need to conduct safety and health audits and inspections. As I told you earlier, that it is important to conduct these audit and safety and health inspections, because it is one, when you keep conducting such inspections, it can give you an idea it can give you signals if there is anything hazardous or if there is anything going wrong, and you can fix that something before it actually happens. And secondly, when you are conducting such audits and you are conducting such inspections, it also is giving a signal to the employees about your commitment or about the management commitment towards safety and health programs. Here I have an example of the cut resistant gloves, right? How you need to wear this kind of material where it is required for your safety. This figure depicts the employee safety responsibility checklist, where you see there are a number of items in this checklist, such as know what constitutes a safety hazard, be consistently on the lookout for safety hazards, correct or report safety hazards immediately, know and use safe work procedures, avoid unsafe acts, keep the work area clean and uncluttered, report accidents, injuries, illnesses, exposures to hazardous substances and near misses immediately, follow company safety rules, look for ways to make the job safer, participate actively in safety training, treat safety as one of your most important job responsibilities. Okay, so the second important factor which contributes to these workplace accidents is the unsafe acts. Unsafe acts, unsafe conditions, first we discussed a number of unsafe conditions, and we understand by now that unsafe conditions are basically coming from the employer, right? And unsafe acts are coming on the part of the employees. Employees are playing unsafe. So such as an employee's act to smoke near inflammable material, right? And imagine that what kind of accidents it can cause, and how huge and how massive that accident can be. Then processing at unsafe speed, such as too fast or too slow, tampering machinery and equipment, using unsafe procedures, bypassing safety instructions. So you're bypassing safety instructions and then you are using the unsafe procedures, or you're tampering machinery or equipment, or you're processing at too fast or too slow speeds, or you're throwing materials such as supplies and chemical, etc. You're abusing, quarreling, fighting, teasing other employees, etc. So these are all different types of unsafe acts, or different categories of unsafe acts. How you can reduce the unsafe conditions. Other than these two, we have a third factor as well that can cause workplace accidents, and that can be termed as the chance occurrences, right? Chance occurrences are when something happens or some accident occurs in the workplace which is beyond the control of the management, right? For example, an earthquake comes and it massively destroys everything at the workplace, right? And that is beyond the control of the management. Or if you're sitting in your office and working in your office, and somebody throws a stone at the window of your office and breaks the window, and the glass of the window, it falls on you, injuring you, and also putting scratches on your table and on your desktop. So who is responsible for this? Of course, it is neither the management who is responsible for this, or neither it is the unsafe act on the part of the employee. So it's not the employee. So it is the beyond the control of the management, right? So then we have this. Okay, so there you cannot do anything when there are occurrences. There are chance occurrences such as the natural calamities or any such thing. But there are situations such as the unsafe conditions or unsafe acts where the organizations can do a lot, right? And where the employer is responsible for any occupational or safety accident, such as identify how you can reduce this unsafe conditions by identifying and eliminating unsafe conditions. So if there are certain defective machinery, or if there is some unsafe procedure, you need to rectify that. You use administrative means such as job rotation. Don't keep one employee or a few employees exposed to some hazardous conditions or some hazardous material or some difficult material or difficult process. Keep the job rotation process on. This won't be monotonous for only a few employees, but job rotation, because if it becomes monotonous, they might lose their attention, they might lose their concentration, and chances of accidents might increase. Use personal protective equipment as well. Then how you can reduce the unsafe acts? That is through emphasizing top commitment management. You need to emphasize safety. You establish a safety policy. You reduce unsafe acts through selection. right? And as I told you here, that in selection, how can you reduce the workplace threats? By checking the personality of the individuals and so on. And then they provide safety training, use posters and other propaganda, use positive reinforcement, use behavior-based safety programs, encourage worker participation, and conduct safety and health inspections regularly. So we discussed that how you can prevent accidents through ways of selection. Then we also discussed how you need to train the employees to reduce the unsafe acts, and how you need to motivate them to reduce the unsafe acts. You need to display the safety posters as constant reminders, but not a substitute for a comprehensive safety program. So of course it is they are in addition to these posters, they are in supplement to the comprehensive safety program. They are not a substitute for that safety program. And then you need to have the incentive scheme reinforce positive attitude towards safety. Then we discussed the behavior-based safety, where you identifying the worker behavior that contributes to accidents, and then training workers to avoid those behaviors. Then you use employee participation. There are two reasons to get employees involved in designing safety program, such that people doing the actual job and easier to get the employees to affect the safety program. And these two I explained to you earlier. Then appointing employees as members of safety teams. Right, so if you appoint them, so it would have the same effect as the employee participation, right? And then routine inspection on all premises for safety and health problems. Of course, you can control workers' compensation costs before the accident by communicating the written policy and substance abuse policies to workers, and then strictly enforcing those policies, right? So of course you can prevent those compensation costs even before, by preventing the accidents from occurring. Communicate to them the policies and take strict audits on them. Then after the accident, you need to be proactive in providing first aid and make sure that the worker gets quick medical attention. Make it clear that you are interested in the injured worker and his or her fears and questions. Document the accident, file required accident report, and encourage a speedy return to work. This is what you can do. After the accident, you need to take it seriously, and you need to give the injured worker quicker medical attention, and you need to motivate him towards quicker coming back to work. What are the different remedies for these workplace health hazards? The basic industrial hygiene program, it constitutes of three different elements. One is the recognition, that you identify a possible hazard, then you evaluate, you assess the severity of that hazard, and then you take the control steps or elimination or reduction of the hazards, the control measures that you use. These are the three constituents of a basic industrial hygiene program. So there can be a number of workplace health hazards. So till now we have done the different safety hazards. Now we will discuss a number of the health hazards. The first one is the infectious diseases, and the other one is the alcoholism and substance abuse. Infectious diseases, of course, we know that, such as the spread of the SARS epidemic, or there can be a number of other infectious diseases that spread in the workplace, and that can really be to the disadvantage for the other employees in the organization, and the organization needs to have a policy on the infectious diseases, that if an employee has caught an infectious disease, he needs to stay back home for a few days until he has completely recovered, and then he should come back to office, so that is not spread to the other employees in the organization, right? And there is then there are certain chemicals and other hazardous material towards which you have the exposure, such as the excessive noise and the vibrations. They can affect your health. They can they can even bring you under stress, right? You cannot concentrate, and it can these can be these chemicals and other hazardous materials. They can be that can be harmful to your eyes, and of course you have greater exposure to, for example, in certain jobs you have greater exposure to ultraviolet rays and other chemicals. Then the temperature extremes, such as too hot and too cold temperatures, and the slippery floors and blocked passageways. They are the different workplace exposure hazards. How you can deal with the drug abuse and alcoholism. Some employees, they do drink. What are its consequences for the organization? Of course, it has a number of consequences for the organization in terms of the job, the loss in the job performance of the employee who drinks at the workplace, right? He of course, his productivity will reduce, his absenteeism tends to reduce, and his turnover also tends to increase, and his overall performance is going to decline, and his overall health and his overall concentration is going to decline. And similarly, the drug abuse that can also have similar consequences for the individual and for the organization on the whole. So for the alcohol, of course, there are no such tests which can through which you can check whether the employee drinks or not. But for the drug abuse, there are a number of tests that can be employed by the organization to check if the employee is using certain kind of drugs. If an employee appears to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol, ask how the employee feels and look for signs of impairment such as slurred speech. So this is how you can recognize whether the employee is using the alcohol or certain other forms of drug. Then if you have the idea that he is, then send the employee judged unfit for duty home. Make a written record of your observation and follow up each accident. Inform the workers of the number of warnings the company will tolerate before requiring termination. So you give a few warnings to the employee and then terminate such workers, because they can be really difficult for the organization to handle, and they can be very costly for the organization to handle. Then refer troubled employees to the company's employee assistance program. There are a number of drug tests that you can hold to look for the employees who are using the drugs. So first, of course, and most recommended is the pre-employment test, that at the time of the selection you test the employees for any drug use, right? Then there are the random tests that can occur in the workplace during the different hours. And then there are the post-accident tests, and there are reasonable suspicion and return to duty testing. Then, of course, job stress is another workplace hazard, and it again has a number of consequences in terms of the reduced concentration of the workers, then reduced job performance and reduced productivity, and more dissatisfaction with the job, with the supervisor, with the co-worker, and with the overall workplace, and a number of such other related outcomes for the organization and the individual. And of course, we know that the job stress, it can both be personal and it can be organizational. So stress can be personal when there are when it's coming from your personal life, right, or when you're unable to maintain the work-life balance, or when, for example, your spouse is posted at some other place and you are posted in another city or in another country, and you are stressed, right, or you don't have very good relationships, there's some problem with that, or any area, any personal reason that can cause the stress. What you can do is that there are a number of different things that you can do to reduce this stress which is coming from the personal reasons. Build rewarding, pleasant and cooperative relationships. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Build an effective and supportive relationship with your boss. Negotiate with your boss for realistic deadlines or projects. Learn as much as you can about upcoming events and get as much lead time as you can to prepare for them. Find time every day for detachment and relaxation. Take a walk to keep your body refreshed and alert. Find ways to reduce unnecessary noise. Reduce trivia in your job. Delegate routine work. Limit interruptions. Don't put off dealing with distasteful problems. Make a worry list that includes solutions for each problem. So discuss with your boss. That is the punchline, right? Discuss with your boss if you have whatever the problems you have, if you want to reduce your deadlines, if you want to if you have some other alternative ways or other alternative solutions, just come up with a discussion with your boss and seek his advice and seek his help on that. And then other than that, try to reduce unnecessary exposure to the noise or anything that is adding to your stress. You can even take a few days off from your work and sit back and try to relax, right? Or you can do some meditation, or there are a number of other things that I just read out for you. Then from the organizational factors, when the job stress is coming, right, from the pressures from your supervisor or from your organization towards meeting deadlines, towards achieving the targets, achieving the sales, and the number of other areas such as the bad relationships with your supervisor, that can be a job stress factor for you even, right? Or your work conditions or your work assignment or job assignment is such that it is very stressful for you. So again, you can reduce this stress which is coming from the organizational factors by providing supportive supervisors, ensure fair treatment for all employees, right? Reduce personal conflicts on the job, right? So reduce those conflicts which are arriving from interpersonal relationships, and treat the employees fairly. So your stress level would be reduced if you perceive that the organization is just with you, and organization is using just procedures, and it is arriving at a just way to it is using a just way to arrive at the outcome. So when it perceives justice from the organization and from the management and from the supervisors, the employees, their stress is reduced. So build healthy relationships with your supervisors and treat the employees fairly on the job, and reduce the personal conflicts. The conflicts, if they are task related conflicts, they are not that stressful for the employees, but if the conflicts are in relational or they're interpersonal relationship oriented, then such conflicts they are more stressful. Then have open communication between management and employees. That is very important, because then you have the time to say what you're feeling, how you're feeling, and how you need certain things to be changed, or how they're adding stress to you. You have more opportunity to say them when you have the open communication with them, and that can reduce to your stress. And then support employees' efforts, for instance, by regularly asking how they're doing. Ensure effective job person fit, such as since a mistake can trigger stress. So give employees more control over their jobs. The more control they have over their jobs, the more chances are that they will be less stressed. Provide employee assistance programs during including the professional counseling. And then the burnout. Burnout is again a condition wherein there is the total depletion of the physical and mental resources caused by excessive striving to reach an unrealistic work-related goal. So this is an extreme form of stress, but it is what's happening is that this is more related to the organizational factors, that you have certain work-related goals which were really unrealistic, and you have all your resources, physical and mental, they both have depleted, and then you are into the burnout. So again, the consequences of burnout are similar as we discussed the consequences for job stress. But here this is the extreme form of job stress, the burnout, right? And the consequences are also more severe. So recovering from burnout is that there are different steps. Again, break the usual patterns to achieve a more well-rounded life. Give away from it all periodically to think alone. Reassess goals in terms of their intrinsic worth and attainability. Think about work. Could the job be done without being so intense, right? Such as we know that type A personalities, they remain more stressed compared to the type B personalities who are really easygoing, right? So if you really yourself set very strict deadlines for you, and you yourself are very hard upon you, then that is also going to cause you more burnout. Then we discussed that there are other computer related health problems, such as which can cause the problems in the eyes, on your eyesight. There can be burning in your eye, there can be itching in your eye, and there can be other number of problems such as the backaches can start, or there can be other stuffiness and for sitting long hours in front of the computer. And you can avoid also those problems by maintaining maintaining a safe distance from the computer, and having good sitting postures, having good chair, comfortable chair, maintaining appropriate height between of your sitting and the computer table, and the steps like that. Then you not need to continuously work for hours and hours in front of computer, but take breaks of short intervals. Between short intervals, take small breaks, such as after every 40-50 minutes you need to get up from your chair and take a round, make photocopies, or do other work, have a cup of coffee, only just relax for 5-10 minutes and then again get back to work. So you can also avoid a number of other health related problems which are related to your backaches, which are related to your stuffiness, or which are related to your eye burns, etc., that can be easily coped with by using this kind of small tips. Then the workplace smoking, of course, it's again another health hazard, wherein the active smokers, they not only harm themselves but they also harm the passive smokers. There's certain organizations, they have this smoking policy, that there no smoke policy. Some of the organizations, they have the smoke rooms wherein you can smoke, and in some organizations they don't have the smoke rooms. You need to go outside in the public place to to smoke, but you cannot smoke within the premises of the organization. Violence at workplace, what do we term as violent? It is the overly defensive, obsessive and paranoid employee, overly confrontational or antisocial behavior, sexually aggressive behavior, isolationist, insubordinate behavior, and tendency to overreact. So these are all the violent workplace behaviors. There are a number of steps that you can use to reduce this violence at workplace, such as institute heightened security measures, improve employee screening. Again, you look for the employees who are more aggressive and who are more prone to violence and screen them out. Provide the workplace training on violence. Provide organizational justice. Of course, if the employees, they perceive justice, then they will be less violent, they will be less angry with the organization. Then pay enhanced attention to employee retention and dismissal, right? And why you are dismissing an employee? Because sometimes when you are dismissing an employee, that employee is expected to be very violent, and when you're handling the dismissal employee, or when you're conducting the dismissal interview, you really specifically need to be very careful, because the employee can, on listening to the news of being dismissed, he can get violent, and he can harm the office equipment, he can harm the other employees, he can even harm himself. So you need to institute certain security measures before conducting such dismissal interviews. Then promptly deal with the angry employees and understand the legal constraints on reducing workplace violence. How you can deal with the angry employees? Make an eye contact with them, pay full attention to the employee, be calm, be honest and modest, listen to the employee, request for examples, that what makes them angry, and explain by example, explain the situation. Delicately and diplomatically define the problem and inquire about the situation and feelings. If necessary, just set up an inquiry committee and listen to the views of the employees, complaints of the employees, and then have certain examination of the situation, and by collecting the evidence and the facts, and then arrive at certain decisions. So be calm and quiet, and be very good listener when you are dealing with the angry employees. You need to be very very patient, and you need to handle the situation very diplomatically. So that was all for today. For today's lecture, we had a discussion on the different safety and health hazards that the organization faces. What are the consequences of how the occupational injuries, what are the consequences of the occupational injuries for the organization in terms of the economic, financial losses, and in terms of the loss in the time and sometimes the loss in the employees of the employees. Why it is important to have a safety policy, and what are the different conditions or different factors that are responsible for the workplace accidents, such as the unsafe conditions which are coming from the employer, the unsafe acts which are coming from the employee. But the unsafe acts on the part of the employer is held liable for those unsafe acts on the part of the employee if the employer did not take appropriate steps to make the employees not play unsafe, right? So we also saw that there can be certain chance occurrences which are beyond the control of the management, and then we had a discussion on a number of health hazards, such as the computer related hazards, such as the smoking, such as the infectious diseases, alcohol and substance abuse at the workplace. What are the consequences of these different issues for the individual and the organizational outcomes, and what policies and how organization can make their policies to deal with these kind of different issues, right? And then we we saw that who are violent employees, and how the organization could deal with the violent employees, and we lastly saw that how the organization can deal with the angry employees. So with this we come to an end of today's lecture. I thank you very much for your patient hearing. I hope you enjoyed today's lecture. I thank you all. Allah Hafiz.